The other day I was scrolling through Pinterest looking at beautiful art of my favorite characters and getting inspired when I found something. A tutorial on how to render the face. And then I thought, this seems interesting enough. Why not make a video out of it? And here we are with a completely original idea of taking these tutorials and trying them out in my own artwork. I won't lie, this actually started out as a YouTube Shorts tutorial video, but I couldn't find any, so I went to Pinterest to look up TikTok tutorials because I live in Iraq and don't have TikTok, and then I came across a new type of tutorial. Pinterest tutorials. Basically still images that explain things with words. Um, so today we will be applying these techniques to our own illustration and hopefully creating something entirely original, or an abomination of art techniques and styles. Who knows? Anyways, let's get to it. You could probably tell by now that I'm drawing Kaveh from Genshin Impact, or rather a very botched version of Kaveh. I'm sorry. And we're just finishing the refined sketch. The tutorials I chose for today are all about coloring and rendering, so the sketch and drawing bits aren't really that important. I'm also going to skip the base coloring stage since that doesn't really have much to do with the tutorials either, and they're kind of boring. Alright, so the first tutorial is about color. Also, I know this is in Korean, but I will gladly take credit for Google Translate's work and explain it in my own words. So the first part in this tutorial basically talks about how to pick your colors, specifically to balance, according to Google, chromatic and achromatic colors. I know I set out to explain this in my own words, but this isn't an English exam, and I can find a better way to explain it, so Google phrasing it is, I guess. Anyways, what I think it's trying to tell us is how to add other colors when rendering so that it's visually more interesting and still makes sense, I guess art-wise. I don't know. I don't know how to explain things sometimes. Anyways, the first part of the tutorial, like I said before, tells you how to pick your colors, which I am doing now. The first two colors in the palette should be quite similar. I'm actually having difficulties with how similar they should be. It would seem that one should be more dark and maybe of lower saturation, but I'm not entirely sure by how much, so I'm just kind of messing around a bit until it looked right. I also ended up tweaking the hue a bit, which I'm not sure we were supposed to do, but I think they should be fine as long as they are similar, right? Anyways, to pick the color, we are going to use the power known as maths and turn the color selector wheel by 30 degrees. How much is 30 degrees? I don't know, but I'm not about to bring a protractor out for this, so an approximation is all we get. Actually, is that what that thing's called? A protractor? Like the thing that measures angle that kind of looks like a semicircle? Well, is a semicircle? I'm getting off track. Anyways, I actually ended up going 30 degrees in the direction of purple and blue. But I think you could go either way, so, you know. The final color we're going to pick is the highlight, which they suggest using a bright saturated color for. I am guessing which color is up to you. I chose green because that's what they did for red, and the skin is kind of similar to red, but I also realized that they have a specific section for skin and they went with yellow there instead. I guess I'll just go with what I already chose because rules are meant to be broken sometimes. Also, I'm pretty sure this like depends on firstly environment, which I guess green doesn't really match the environment either, but oh well. and as well as like personal preference. So, speaking of the section about skin, that's what we're going to look at next. I actually have another tutorial for the face, but since it was included in this one as well, I'll do this first. Also, I'm not gonna follow this to the T since I used the second color in the palette as a base and I wasn't really supposed to do that, as you can see. So we're just gonna ignore that and proceed with the tutorial like nothing's wrong. So to start out with, we're going to add a gradient with the first color we had in our palette. I am going to use a soft airbrush and blend it for this since we want that nice transition between the two colors. After that, I used a more saturated color and used that original gradient color to add some harder shadows. The next step was to use the purplish color I'd chosen for the dark shadows around the face, at which point I decided to switch tutorials and completely forgot about the highlights because, I don't know, I do things my way, I guess. Okay, so the next tutorial, I'm not gonna lie, I feel like this is pretty straightforward. But I'll read it out to y'all anyways, because I know the attention span of the modern day generation probably ain't enough to read. So I will indulge you. Anyways, we're basically just using specific colors around the vase to signify kind of specific elements of rendering, I guess. The first would be a red or pink as the blush, which I already completely botched since the color I chose was neither red nor pink. It was orange. Coral, if you give it the benefit of the doubt. But I digress. The next color we're adding is yellow slash orange for subtle shading and depth. Okay, I'm actually not sure what this is for, but I'm assuming it takes place of the midtone that I'd usually use for the less obvious shadows and stuff like that. Although, like I said, I'm not really sure about that, but we'll follow it anyways. Finally, we're going to use a cool color like blue, green, or purple for some reflective shadows. I actually already do this a lot of the time, and having kind of definitive places to put these is pretty useful, especially for beginners or immediate artists. But I do want to make notice of that a lot of things, particularly the environment, could actually influence the color of the reflective shadows. And on that note, I'm actually a bit confused about that term. I assume we're talking about reflective light, but I'm not really sure about that either. I'm just gonna go with reflective light for our little tutorial analysis. But yeah, that's kind of it for this tutorial. I did adapt this to my purposes, particularly to match my style. I blended the colors out and set the layer to color burn, along with some other minor adjustments. One thing I had a lot of difficulty with was the actual placements of these colors. I drew Kaveh in a side profile perspective, so the exact placements are a bit difficult to nail down. But other than that, I think this tutorial is pretty straightforward. And it's good that it teaches folks to add visual interest to a piece. So I'm not complaining. It's an okay tutorial. And we're moving on to hair. Yeah, no, we're not getting back to tutorial 1 yet. I actually had one more tutorial after this, but I yapped too much, so I don't really have the time left. Also, when I was writing this video yesterday, I was slowly losing the will to live because carpal tunnel decided to peer its head again. So that's an added bonus, I guess. Anyways, let's take a look at that hair tutorial and just get this over with. That's writer me speaking, by the way. The first step is to create a gradient with a darker color going inwards from the edges of the hair. So, editor Leah here to tell you that that's not what you are supposed to do at all. Um, Disregard everything I just said. You're only supposed to add the surrounding colors to the hair and not the darker color. I kind of mixed up two tutorials, I'm pretty sure, so just don't listen to me. I'm an idiot sometimes, okay? Just get back to it. Something else they mentioned was using surrounding colors subtly in the hair to make it more transparent, I think. The effect was not really mentioned, but I assume that's what they want from my own knowledge and that of other tutorials. But I will say that for me, leaving this till the end made it easier than applying it at the start. The next step is to add some cell shading. This is quite different from my usual technique, so it was a bit tricky to nail down, but I think cell shading is an extremely useful technique to learn because it kind of trains confidence, which you also need when applying hard shadow like in semi-realism. And you can really see the moment I locked in and went all in for the shadows here. Anyways, back to the tutorial at hand. The next step is to add these leaf shaped things in the hair and in like a ring shape. I also blended them out along with the shadows from earlier. Yeah, I do like straying from instructions. It's why I shouldn't buy IKEA furniture. Moving on to the final steps, we are adding the highlights, which I think are pure white, and this also goes in a ring sort of shape, but not as big as the ring from earlier with the leaves, I guess. I also added in the surrounding colors from before and some final touches. Does it look like the hair in the tutorial? No. But that's the thing with the tutorials. You can use them how you want, and application, but not really following them directly is one of the best ways to do that. At least what I think is one of the best ways to do that. And after all that yapping, we're finally back to tutorial 1 and adding the highlights to the base. The reason we're using such a bright and saturated color is because it supposedly creates this glowing effect, and we're basically just adding it around the edges and wherever else we see a really bright shadow, like in the cheek in this reference. I also did this for the hair, but with blue. As for why it's blue, I don't know. I just went with the flow. And that's kind of it for the highlights. Which leaves us with the end of this video. Yeah, I know the piece is still half finished, but I don't have a tutorial for clothes, and also as stated before, Carpal Tunnel did not want me to write any longer. So I'll quickly finish off the piece, and I guess I'll just get back to you all with the outro. Just to round things up a bit, I do have to express that I'm not entirely satisfied with this piece or the video itself. Everything was very rushed, and I just procrastinated a lot making this whole thing. So, not a fan, but oh well. Here is Kaveh in all his glory. This piece was originally meant as a birthday gift for him, but that was like a couple of days ago and a week by the time this video comes out. And yeah, no, I did not finish this piece in time. I actually posted a different piece that day, so, you know, but it's fine. I really did enjoy making this video despite my procrastination, and I definitely learned something from it. And yeah, I hope you learned something from it too. and subscribe for more. Bye!